Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a subscriber with us who we all know. She is a staple in the comment section, and she has been in the Q&A. She shared her Sasquatch encounter. I have Jane back with us. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they just don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Last but not least, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3 is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. Written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. The links to those are in the description as well. Now, I've definitely taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Also, really quick, before we get into the upload, I was, when Jane and I were conversating, I got a very interesting text from a group out of the West Coast who do some on-hand investigation in the Pacific Northwest. They messaged me. So there's a bit of a silence between me and Jane, and that's what I was doing. I was communicating back and forth with them. So if anyone was wondering what happened, that's what happened. All right, everybody. Today I have a subscriber who everybody knows in the comment section. Jane. Jane, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jeff?
I'm very good. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely.
Now, a lot of you who are new to the channel may not know who Jane is. She's in the comment section. She is a staple in that comment section. But she had a very terrifying Sasquatch encounter in Montana, I believe it was. And today, she's going to share some supernatural experiences that she's had. I've been looking forward to her sharing these with us. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Jane, and she can share her experiences with us. Jane?
Yes. Ready to go.
Ready to go.
Alrighty. It's probably when I first realized I was having things go on that a lot of other people didn't. I was about 5 years old. And I used to call them cartoons because I really didn't understand what they were. I could look at people and I couldn't see their face. And a couple months later, they would pass away. I remember my grandfather sitting with me at the table, and he patted my hand and he says, "I know that you can see things." And he said, "Don't be afraid of it." He said, "Most of the time it won't be anything, horrific or scary." And, I was 5 years old. I trusted him. So a lot of that went on, looking at people, knowing who was on the phone, even as a little kid. Before the phone would even ring, I'd know the phone was going to ring and it would be my grandmother or whatever. So getting up to about when I was 19 years old, I started working at the animal hospital. And one night I had this dream before I went into work, that the hospital was on fire, like this hellacious fire. It was a very vivid dream, very colorful. And I remember in the dream, they were very frustrated because they couldn't put the fire out with water. And that was kind of a focal point to the dream. Well, I get up the next morning and I'm like, wow. And it was a very realistic thing. So I get ready, I get to the hospital, and I'm pulling into the parking lot, and I look, and the hospital's in flames. I'm like, oh my God. And I turn away and look again, and nothing. And I'm like, okay. So we get our stuff done in the morning, working with some surgery and things like that, and cleaning up, a lot of that with animals. And I asked my boss, I asked him about the wiring in the walls. I said, is there ever been a problem? Because it was an older hospital. Ever been a problem with any of that? And he said he didn't think so. So we go to lunch. We're gone for like 2 hours. We had a long day. It was 7 to 6 a lot of times, and we had a 2-hour break in the day. We come back, and there are fire trucks in the parking lot. I go walking in, and I look at my boss, and he says, the next time, I told him, I said, I dreamt this. He said they couldn't put the fire out. He said they had to use fire extinguishers. There was a fire in the wall, and he said he was afraid they were going to have to break the walls down. They didn't. They did get the whole thing out. But he said the next time I was telling him about my dream, he says, let me know next time you have a dream like that. And I said, well, I kind of tried, but not everybody is always open to that sort of thing. And that was that for that. A lot of other things, a lot of premonitions and things like that. One night, I remember waking up. It was in the winter time, and I jumped up. I was crying. I ran to my phone, and I called my brother. My brother Bob, his nickname is Chip. And I called him up crying, and his wife got on the phone too because she wanted to hear what I had to say. I had dreamt that he worked at a garage. He was a mechanic, and it was winter, like I said. And I said, in my dream, you were almost done with work. It was about 5 o'clock at night, and you were getting ready to leave, and you got a call. And it was right, literally up the street. You could see the truck pull over, and it was snowing like mad. And I said, in my dream, you were standing in front of the truck. Traffic was coming. This truck was pulled over to the side, and it would have been the right side of the road. The traffic coming down toward the garage slowly. And I said, all of a sudden, I saw a truck skidding, and all I saw was you. It was like I was you looking, and all I could see were flashing lights. And I said, please, I said, if this happens, if this comes to pass, don't stand in front of the truck. Stand to the side, and stand on the side of the road. Don't stand in the road if you're looking. Well, he calls me up about a week later, and he says, I have to tell you, he says, you saved my life. And I said, what happened? And he told me what happened. He was getting ready. He'd had a long day. It was about 5 or 5:30 at night. He was getting ready to leave, and they got a call, and they asked him if he could go. And he said he stopped, and he thought about it, and he's like, okay. He went. It was right up the street, and he went to stand in front of this. Makes me so nauseous to think about. He went to stand in front of the truck, and he said, oh, wait a minute. He stood around, walked around to the side. Well, don't you think a truck came sliding across the road and smashed into the front of that guy's pickup?
Wow.
Had I not told my brother, we wouldn't have my brother right now.
Yeah, that's wow.
Yeah, it was awful. When I woke up, Jeff, I was in tears because I thought, oh my God. And it was a very heavy feeling in my chest. Now, my other brother, my youngest brother, I had something happen while he was working. This was when he was younger. He was cutting a lot of lawns and doing a lot of work like that. And the dream wasn't real vivid, but I do remember he was cutting lawns, and something happened where the lawnmower flipped. And I remember looking up, and I could see a woman, a brunette woman, older woman with a yellow dress on in the house. And I told my brother about this, and I said, just be careful at some of the houses you're going to. if the lawns you're cutting are on a hill. I said, I just have a feeling that something's going to happen. A few days later, he comes home and he says, well, he said, I was doing the lawn. Something happened with the lawnmower. His foot almost got caught under it, I guess. He pushed the lawnmower away because he remembered what I had said. And he looked up at the house, which was an abandoned house. They were there. I guess the people were selling the house. And there was a woman standing there with dark hair and a yellow dress on. And he remembered that. And he said, if it wasn't for the fact that you told me what you did, he said, my foot would have got caught under this big mower. And, that would have been it. So again, with my younger brother, this is when I was first married, the first time. And I remember I was cleaning in the bedroom, and his picture, for no reason, fell 3 individual times. And I'm like, what the hell? And I picked it up, put it back, and there was no breeze, no fan, nothing. So I called my mother. I said, okay, by the time it hit the floor the 3rd time, I said, I'm calling Mom. I call her and I said, Ma, I said, is Dave okay? I said, his picture has fallen out of my bed frame like 3 times. She goes, oh my God. My brother was volunteering for the fire department. He had on Indian tanks. And I guess they didn't realize they were walking along a cliff. And he stepped right off and fell, I believe, 10 feet maybe. Thank God he was okay. He landed on a lot of brush and he landed on leaves and that kind of thing. But that was another thing that happened. And there's so many different things that have happened throughout my life.
Take your time.
I was driving home one night, and I'm driving along. It was about 1 a.m, coming from the boyfriend's house on a pretty well-traveled road. It's Route 59 in Monroe. It's kind of a through road to like 3 different towns, and driving a little too fast, as I usually did. And I was coming up to a curve, and I looked next to me, and I saw my grandfather sitting there. And he looked at me and he said, slow down, Janie girl. And I hit the brakes. I came around a curve, and a big, huge buck jumped out in front of me. And I looked again, and my grandfather was gone. Now, my grandfather passed away when I was 14. This happened when I was 23. And I was like, okay, Grandpa, I get the message. And I got back. I was living over the animal hospital at that time, and got back and made myself a cup of tea and calmed down. Well, while I was living at the animal hospital, there was a house next door. And I had 2 kitties that lived with me. And they used to sit and look in the window. I'm trying to go like chronologically as some of the bigger things that have happened, because there's so many little things in between. They would look at the house next door and hiss. And many times I pulled into where I parked and looked at that house, and I'd see this old man in overalls, like with a big long beard. He just looked very sad. And I knew nobody lived in that house. And numerous times I saw this man, and we actually had to go into that house one time to chase a cat that got out, and it was horrendous. I had to leave the house. The air was so that you couldn't breathe. You just couldn't get any air at all. And I found out that the gentleman's daughter, I believed, committed suicide in that house. And he just was so sad that I guess even after he passed, he couldn't leave there. He didn't want to leave because that's where she had passed away. And I should have made a list, actually. I've had a lot of things that have happened with me where I had a ceramic studio for a long time, pottery and that kind of thing, and I would be at shows. And I would have people out of nowhere just walk up to me and say, I feel like I can talk to you. And they would just talk and talk. And I would listen because I guess it's that empathic thing. By the time these shows would get done, I'd be exhausted because they would be talking about so many different things, and it kind of wore you out. One of the hospitals I worked at, I worked with a man that was an excellent veterinarian. I guess apparently he didn't think he was as good as we all did. And he passed away, I guess. I'm not sure. We're not sure what happened, but we found him dead in the office. That was a morning. And a few days after, the guy that I was working with, Bruce, were standing there at the table figuring out the morning, what we needed to do for morning treatments. And we had our orders from the doctor that was filling in. And I looked at the doorway, and Bruce looked at the doorway, and we saw my boss's leg. He used to wear khaki pants a lot with brown moccasins. And I saw a leg, like you just looked up and somebody had walked by, but you caught part of their leg. And I looked at Bruce, and he goes, did you see that? And I'm like, yeah. And next thing you know, we hear walking upstairs at the hospital. Nobody's up there. Nobody lives there. And the doctor that was filling in came in, and we all three stood there. And this happened again in the afternoon. We heard it again. And he looked at us. He says, well, guys, he says, I think we're done for the day. Nobody wanted to stay. Oh, God. And another time, the hospital that I worked at in Monroe, where the gentleman that couldn't leave the home, that hospital, my brother worked with me for quite a while. We worked together. And this hospital was a very odd hospital. It was a home before it was a hospital. It was a little Cape Cod, pretty cozy place. It had a fireplace, and I always felt pretty comfortable in it. A little hot once in a while, like my hair would, even when there was no breeze or anything in a room, my hair would kind of, you know how the breeze will catch your hair and blow it. I'm sitting there one night reading, and I have my Doberman with me because I lived upstairs, the two kitties and my Dobie, Cassie. And all of a sudden I hear my boss come in, and I hear him say, oh, Jane, he was Egyptian. And I said, I'll be right down, Hottie. And Cassie, even my dog, looked. We get up, we go downstairs, there's nobody there. No one. Okay, so one day comes near the end of the day. My boss and I, Hottie, are standing there. My brother was talking to us. He was walking, going to leave the doorway and go outside. He was going to leave. I think it was snowing this day. I'm not sure. But all of a sudden, Hottie and I are standing there, and we're looking at the day's records and so forth. And we hear my brother talk. Whatever entity was in that hospital was actually imitating people. And it did it to all of us at different times. Mm-hmm. Many times when I was upstairs, I would hear my boss, I'd even hear the front door shut, and the door was locked. But many times I would hear him talking, and he wasn't there. I even called him one time. And it was weird. And it's just a lot of things that went on like that. I should have made a list, I guess, because there's so many things. Like even here at the house, both my parents have passed. We own the parents, the home we grew up in. And I've heard my mom say my name. I've heard my dad say my name, to the point where the cats even turn their head and look, or the dog. And the premonitions are the thing that I think bothered me the most, because a lot of times people would say, oh, it's such a gift. Well, a lot of times it's not a gift. Knowing when people are going to pass away is not a gift. Knowing when something bad is about to happen sometimes you can't stop it. It's just going to happen. Is not always a gift, but those are some of the things that have happened. I'll have to try and make a list. I know I'm forgetting a lot of stuff right now. I've had a lot on my mind, but I don't know if you had any questions about anything, Jeff, that I'm saying. Jeff? Jeffrey? Uh-oh.
Yep, right here.
Oh. I'm trying to think of some more of the things that have happened. The dreams have happened quite a bit. Like I said, those were the two big ones.
I'm blown away with the premonitions in the very beginning. Your brother Chip's one. That was just...
that was tough. That was awful. I woke up, I felt brokenhearted.
Yeah. How old were you during that time?
I was 33, I believe.
Wow. Does he still talk about that every once in a while?
Oh, we talked about it after, because he called me to tell me, and every once in a while, when I talk to him, we'll mention it. And the same with my other brother, David. David is the one that we live here, in the house. And that was a weird thing too. I don't know that I remembered that exact, but I know that had he slipped with that lawnmower, that could have really done a lot of damage. Yeah. I guess it was a pretty big lawnmower, and there was a pond there.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I've read a lot, and I've talked a lot with people who have had encounters just throughout the years that I've been kind of researching it. And it seems that there's a large percent of people who are empath or have premonitions that have encounters with either a Sasquatch or a Dogman, and I wonder if they're connected. I'm at a point in my life now where I've kind of accepted that all of it is connected, but I'm trying to figure out a way that connects them. I had watched a show a while ago, and they were talking about dimensions and people who have had, dreams that, premonitions, or can see things while being, awake. And they've had encounters with
the flashes.
They've had these encounters with what they called a jinn. And I wonder if the connection is that, these things are other dimensional, but, flesh and blood, clearly flesh and blood, but live and can cross over from a different dimension through a portal somehow or somewhere.
Like a vortex kind of thing?
Yeah.
I believe in that because, there's just a lot of things that have happened, and it just seems some people are more prone toward having these things happen than others.
Right.
And, throughout my life, like I said, I've had many people walk up to me to talk about their lives, and I'd stand there at first when it started to happen. I'd be like, oh my God. But then I'd think, these poor people, they just want to talk, and who am I to not listen, to give them the ear. And it's interesting that you say that, Jeff, because one night when I was coming home from my shop, now where my shop was, it was a pretty cool place. I was in part of the building that was the YMCA at the time, but I was in this really beautiful. It was an old house, and it was definitely haunted. Absolutely. I was in the bottom part of it where there were these big, huge 3 fireplaces, and it was just a beautiful spot. And many times I'd hear doors slam when I was there by myself, and it's just, you just know what it is, But
Right.
I was driving home one night, and this speaks to what you're saying about people that are empathic. I'm driving home, and I get on the Pepper Street, and there's this one spot, I never drive by it now that I don't think of this. I'm driving along, and all of a sudden I feel, wham, something hits the back of my truck, and not hard enough to make the wheels fly up in the back, but they chirped a little bit. And I'm like, what the hell? And I hit my brakes, and I hear, as clearly as I'm talking to you, something go, don't. And I'm like, what? And it says, don't. And I hit the gas, and I looked in my mirror because I'm like, oh my God, something ran into my truck. Did I hurt something? But who knows what that could have been, but it definitely didn't want me to stop. Right. Someone didn't want me to stop. And I think when you speak about portals and that kind of thing, I definitely think that's what that was, I mean, who knows? And I know other people have experienced that too, where they've had something slam into their vehicle, but to hear the words, and to hear people talking.
That adds a whole different
different
type of scary to it. I mean, to get slammed and not see anything is creepy already, but then to hear
and it
something
hit hard.
Yeah. Wow, that's that right there is insane.
And I know many times people talk about hearing someone they know call their name, and that happened with my before I was married the first time with my boyfriend and I. We were in his garage, and he had kind of a wood shop in there, and no one was home at his house. And we had stopped for a few minutes, and all of a sudden we hear his mom, clear as day, go, she called him, she goes, oh, Johnny, like that. And I looked at him, and then we heard her again. And we just packed up the garage and we left because, that was probably one of the first times I'd heard what I would call a disembodied voice,
Right.
And I a few times I've heard my dad, I've heard my mom say things to me, and, after they had passed, right? My brother's agreeing with me. My brother, yep. My mom was not a fan of a lot of the modern technology, and we laugh about it. My brother put his iPad on the counter.
Oh man, she didn't like that, I guess.
And it was sitting there, fully on the counter, and something flipped it right off the counter in front of him. And we laugh about it because it's like, we're like, okay, Mom.
That's creepy. Yeah.
Yep. The paranormal stuff, I guess that's what people call it. To me, it was kind of part of who I am, even as a little tiny kid.
Right.
A lot of times I didn't understand what was going on, and it's been an interesting life, and I'll have to write down a bunch more of them because for some reason I'm having a little mental block.
That's fine. When you had your encounter with the Sasquatch, how old were you?
Oh, I was 22. Okay.
And obviously you had things happen prior to that. So,
yep.
It just brings me back to thinking that people with, that are able to see premonitions are, I think these creatures are drawn to, yes, there are those people that don't see, that don't have premonitions. There are those, just regular people who go out in the woods and, have the encounter. But it seems to me that it's like a large percentage, 60% we'll say. To me, it seems that have had encounters. I don't know if you'd like to just kind of do a brief recap on your Sasquatch to end the upload with.
Oh, sure.
All right.
Sure. Well, like I said, I was 22 years old, and I was married to that first husband, John, and we did 2 cross-country trips. And this was on the first trip, and we're driving along. And like I'd said before, we have a beautiful country. I mean, we went up to Niagara Falls, which we had never seen, and all over that way. We're driving up the northern route across, and stopped at quite a few places. I have to say, one of the strangest places I felt was strange was Devil's Tower. What a weird freaking place that is, my friend. Weird place to walked around the whole base of it.
Now, what state is that in?
Devil's Tower is in Devil's Tower. Is that in South Dakota or Wyoming? I can't think of which state that's in.
I think it's South Dakota.
No, I think it's in South Dakota,
yeah,
right?
I think South Dakota. Yeah.
So, we get done there. We're entering into Montana and driving along looking for a place that looked nice. We were going to pull into camp. And he sees this road. It wasn't even a road. What am I saying? It was just this kind of a path down in this canyon. And there was some old sign there. And I said, we don't really want to go down there, do we? And we didn't have 4-wheel drive. We had one of those campers that you drive under and set and clamp down, however we did it, to the back of the truck.
Right.
And he says, he goes, let's go. And I'm like, oh, God. Well, it took us like a half an hour just to get down in there. And we were going so slow. Now, mind you, my dogs are in the back. I had 2 Dobermans, my girls. And the poor things, I said, you got to go really slow because they're, bouncing around. And we get down there to this area that was like this big kind of circular area surrounded by kind of thin woods, not heavily wooded, but wooded, like a little cliff on one side, maybe 10, 15 feet down to a river. And in the middle of it was a sort of a little island of trees, but all short shrubbery kind of things. And there was another RV there. We never really did see those people, but I assume they were out hiking or whatever. So we get there and we pull over and we pull up, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 feet from this little cliffway facing out so that we could just drive out in the morning. And I take the girls out, and it didn't occur to me then that my dogs, I walked around, you could kind of go around to the left and down to the river, and I had gotten some water for cooking and washed up. The girls were drinking, but they never left my side. Like I thought they'd want to go and sort of smell and look around, but no, they didn't. I'm like, oh, all right, and I get back up to the camper and I'm cooking stuff and we don't think about it. We had a little campfire set up, and I don't think it was maybe, at first I thought it was about 15 feet, but I always look at my living room as like a gauge of how far away it was. The living room was about 15 feet long, I think. And I think the fire was around 12 feet away. But anyway, I had a camp stove I was cooking on and all that. We get all done. We put the fire out. Now, mind you, we put the fire out with water. And I've spoken to a few people about this. We put the fire out with water. I get the girls ready. They were more than happy to jump into the camper and go to sleep. And I guess this was like around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And next thing I know, I look at John, and the camper lights up with like this glow. And I'm like, what the hell? And we my eyes right now and be as freaked out as I was then. There was a Sasquatch standing there and somehow got the fire cooking. A friend of mine told me, he said there could have been a flame or a spark or something or a coal in between the rocks because we had rocks around it.
Right.
I don't know how this thing did it, but he got that thing going. Just enough so that you could see the outline. I didn't see its face. It definitely had hands. And we were so freaked out. That feeling. My dogs were terrified. This is what really bothered me, almost more than myself, because they were urinating. They peed right on their beds. They were terrified. They were on the floor on their beds, and the poor things were shivering. And this had to have lasted. It just stood there, and it started to sway, like side to side. And I'm like, oh my God, what is it thinking? Because years before this, at the animal hospital, we had a client that had, and I'm not saying that Sasquatch is an ape, because I do not believe that's what it is.
Right. But
this behavior is chimp-like. She had chimps, and she had two little ones. They were maybe, I don't know, they were in diapers, and they had baby shoes on. They were little, and they came up to about my knees, and I was pretty skinny then, too. And she asked me to hold them, and I'm like, oh, sure. And I'm looking at them, and they start swaying side to side. Next thing I know, they fling me into the chairs. So I'm remembering this. I'm thinking, what is this creature thinking? And we laid there and kept moving the curtains a little bit, and it kept just swaying back and forth, back and forth.
Now, was it looking at the camper, or was it looking at the fire? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It was just standing there. It was your typical, I have since found pictures of like one of these in like a shadow kind of a look, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what it looked like. It was the kind of a conical head, no neck, great big, massive shoulders, long arms, big chest, pretty long legs, I would say. And it just stood there. And this is one of the really weird part, weirder than that, like that wasn't weird enough. Next thing I know, we're waking up, and it's about 5:30 in the morning, and I'm looking at John, and he goes, did we really, experience that? And it's like, yeah. And it had been out there. I mean, the girls were soaking wet with urine. I walked them down to the river. They really didn't want to get out of the truck. But I got them down to the river, cleaned them up with some soap and stuff, put them on fresh bedding, and we left. So we go out, and we're still heading towards California. So we take our left west, and we see this little general store, pretty cool little place, and wooden floors. I just remember this so well. A little potbelly stove, and just a cool place. And I'm walking around in there, and John's in there talking to this really nice little old man sitting there with his white beard and long hair. And the next thing I know, John's calling me over, and he says he wants to ask you something. And the gentleman looks at me, and he said, young woman, he says, is it your time? And I looked at him, and I'm like, what? He goes, is it your time? And I'm like, oh, he meant, was
right.
I having my period? And I said, yeah, near the end. And he looked at my husband, and he said, do not take her camping to any more places like that. He says, wherever you're going to go, make sure there are a lot of people around. And that was kind of the quick upshoot, as quick as I can tell, of that encounter. As we were driving out of there, we looked up, and there was like this little rise to these wooded area, and it was standing there, and it screamed. And that's a thing. Like a few years later, I remember waking up sweating, and my dad on the TV, I guess I had fallen asleep, he was watching one of those In Search Of programs, and they had an imitation of the Sasquatch noise. I don't think anybody had recorded it yet, but it was pretty damn close to what we heard. And I looked at him, and that's the first time I talked about it, is when I told my dad about it. And my mom and dad totally believed me. A lot of other people hadn't, but it is what it is. I know what we saw and experienced, and I know by the reaction of my dogs, they were so terrified.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, Dobermans are normally, they're not aggressive, but they're a very good protector of a family dog.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I hate when people say, pit bulls, Dobermans, and Rottweilers are very aggressive and mean, but they're a protective dog. Yes, they can put a hurting on you if they're going to protect you, but to have two, pretty much apex protection dogs to be, pissing
terrified
all over themselves and fear. I mean, that's just, crazy.
And I think one of the things it teaches you is we are definitely not the apex predator out there.
Absolutely.
We are just not.
I agree 100%. Now, so you were with John. Now, the thing that you said about John and you in the garage, hearing his mom's voice, that was obviously before this.
Oh yeah, that was before we were married.
Okay.
And I at first thought, I wonder if he heard that, because I definitely heard it. He looked at me and I'm like, oh boy.
Right.
And then she did it. It did it again. And this was a brand new. Well, they moved in the house brand new, so it's not like anyone passed away. But I don't know what the history of the land was like,
So maybe that's some validation towards the, premonitions and these creatures coming. It's definitely terrifying to think about, but fascinating all in the same sense, and
it is because there's a lot of times when I'm outside and you just get that feeling, like I'll start to get that feeling in my chest kind of, and you just feel like there's more out there than the birds and
yeah, I agree.
And all the animals and so forth.
There's a lady who I had spoken with who lives in Ohio, and I'm hoping to get her on the show. I used you as an example, that you shared your encounter and, told her who you were in the comment section, that you'd definitely be supportive, you and all the rest of the people.
Oh, absolutely.
But where she is in Ohio, she has taken pictures in her backyard, and visibly through her eyes she cannot see anything but senses something's out there.
Yep.
And when she takes pictures,
you feel it.
That's when she can sort of make out. They're not very clear, but she can sense there's something there, and she can kind of make out in these pictures that there's something there. And I'm hoping very soon she'll come and share
I would look forward to that
with us, because it just, that kind of validates the whole vortex dimensional thing as well. And it's just crazy. Your Sasquatch encounter is just, how it could sense that, a woman is on her time, and the dogs being able to sense that creature is outside as well.
Yep. They were terrified.
I don't think they could see it, could they?
I don't know. I don't.
Because if they were on the floor, I don't know how the window.
Oh no, but they knew it was there, though.
Right. So they could sense something was there. They couldn't see it.
We did, but they couldn't. But the poor things were so terrified. It was awful.
Oh, it is terrifying. I honestly love your Sasquatch encounter. I've
Thank you.
I've told certain people, I've talked about it so many times with other people, and it's just it's kind of a warning. Like if you're going
Yep.
hiking and you're going
Yep.
with your family, you've got daughters, you've got, female cousins, aunts, don't go out in the woods when
Exactly.
it's just it's a warning for people. So
I think so. And I try to tell people that, like, especially the women, I said, it's bad enough what could happen to a man, but there's a whole lot more that can happen to you as a female, and it's just nauseating,
yeah.
It really is.
And Kumbo Baker has a story that eventually when he comes back on, that I'm sure he'll share with us. But it's a nightmare for
Yep.
the female and male who did not survive their incident with a couple of Sasquatches. So,
Oh God. Well, I know with Cassie, one of the Dobermans, one of my girls, she was living with me over the animal hospital, and she heard every time I heard the voice talking. She, at that hospital, Hottie actually had the Warrens. You familiar with the Warrens?
Yeah.
They lived right down the road. They came, and she said that hospital was full of, I guess, spirits and that kind of thing. Not that it was anything really malevolent,
Right.
but you could feel it a lot of times.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a presence. It's an
Yeah.
entity that is, it's there. It's disturbing our own magnetic and electric fields that our bodies put off on our,
Yep.
And so once these things come into our area, it's going to be a disturbance. So you can definitely feel them.
And there's been a lot of there's a lot of other things I could talk about, but I'm not going to today. There's not a lot of time left, but you and I will talk about it and see what you think.
All right.
But a lot of, I guess people call it paranormal. I called it normal because it's just how my life was.
Yeah.
The premonitions, the knowing who's going to call, who's going to come over to the house, who's at the door. I mean, and I think a lot of people have this. They just forgot that they do.
Yeah. It's a sense that's just, and as children, we have it more so. Like, I remember living, my parents, bought a home when we moved back to New York. My dad was military, so we traveled all over. And then when we finally came back home to where my parents are from, they bought their first house, and it was a small house, and it was in the village, but where I live is very historical. James Fenimore Cooper wrote Last of the Mohegans here.
Oh, cool.
And, there's just a lot of Native American tradition, a lot of Revolutionary War fighting happened right here where I live.
Mohican is what we're supposed to be, is in my heritage.
Okay.
Mohican, yeah.
So I remember one night we had an attic door, and it was always locked. It had one of those like bolt locks at the top. And, excuse me, it wasn't a night, it was a day. We were going apple picking, and I knocked, my room was, so my bedroom was kind of diagonally from it. The bathroom door was right across from this attic door, and my parents' door was diagonally from it. And I used to peek in the peek hole, and all you could see was the stairs. So, as a kid, maybe 5 or 6, I remember it clear as day. I peeked in the peek hole, and I couldn't see anything, or the keyhole. All I saw was white, and no stairs at this point. And I'm like, what? And I knocked on the door, and my mom calls, and Jeff, we're going. And as I'm rounding the corner, I hear something rap back on the door. And, we went apple picking, and I didn't say anything because, you don't when you're a kid.
Because you kind of take it in stride as a kid. I know I did.
So the next day, my dad was working shift work, and it was me and my mom, and I think we went to like a store or something. We were out, and we came home, and I remember my mom shuttling me out of the house and calling my uncle, who was the sergeant of the village police at the time. And of course, you're a kid, you see 3 cops come, it's cool. But they go in the house and, they check everything.
Your poor mom, though.
Well, the door was open. And, my parents are very diligent about locking, the outside door and stuff like that. And where we lived, it was like a nice neighborhood. Our neighbors, my uncle lived next to us, and my dad's best friend lived on the other side. So, they'd see if anybody tried to break into the house. But this attic door was wide open when me and my mom got home, and she had seen it. Now, the only way, let's say if something was inside the attic, that someone would have to unlock it from the outside, or this presence just unlocked it and opened the door. No one could figure out what happened. There was no trace of anything. It was a really creepy experience. And I used to knock at my closet door at that same house, and something knocked back there too. Shortly after we ended up moving, my grandfather ended up passing away, and we ended up moving out of that house. But it was just a really creepy thing that happened, and nobody can explain it. I told my mom years later, and she remembers the day that door was open, and it's just a freaky. So and I've always remembered that. So it's just something, who knows what it was, but it
had to have made a big impression on you as a little kid.
Oh, yeah. I think it was definitely paranormal. I mean, something, I don't think there was a human up there, because there's no way in hell they could get in the house. Like I said, my parents were just, they had me as I was a kid, so ultra safe. How would anybody get in the attic and then lock that door back up, and then get back out of the attic by unlocking? It's a crazy little thing. So definitely strange. So, but yeah, we're about time. Like you said, we'll discuss a couple of other things that you had to share. It's always a pleasure having you on, Jane.
It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. And it gives a little mix-up to the show, so.
Yeah, and I know I'll remember more things. There's a lot of things that have happened, and I kind of get a little cloudy once in a while.
Yeah.
But I'll make a little list, and maybe we can, if you want, mix it up with some other stuff.
Absolutely. And tonight, everybody, I will be talking to Victor, so we will figure out when we'll do the next Q&A. All right?
Sweet.
All right. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Victor. Jeff.
No, that's all right. Have a good day.
You too.
All right, guys, it is always a pleasure having Jane on. She is just a super nice person. And it's people like Jane that really make this channel work. I give people a platform to share their encounters, but then people like Jane and everyone else in the comment section that help other subscribers or other people deal with their encounter, and it just works, and it makes me super happy and excited to see it work. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. And with that, I want to thank everybody and bid everyone farewell.